Did you see that thing, by the way? They were the promo for this main event where they pulled.
Oh, the thing where they were talking about how he's got the perfect game plan. It's so good, so good.
Joe Rogan literally talking about his opponent as a description of Blachowicz.
That is amazing.
How good is that?
I love it so much.
They couldn't find a single word of praise for Blachowicz from Rogan's call on that fight.
Just lying.
I thought that was super funny. It truly
a great strike from Mr. Black.
Mr. Blachowicz. Yeah.
So good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, as always, Connery Bush, and with me, as always, is Philma Kenzie. And we are here today to discuss a good one. It's a good one, Phil. I'm talking, of course, about, in the context of UFC cards. We've been getting our ass kicked up and down Main Street lately by this UFC schedule, but this is why. It all pays off in the form of a pay-per-view, and in fact, we have another pay-per-view card that looks in some ways stronger than this, and in other ways weaker, next weekend. So, fuck all that noise I was saying about us avoiding the UFC schedule. I'm sure they're putting their best foot forward. This is the kind of quality we can expect across the board moving into the future. And this is back to being a UFC-only show. Are you on board with that, Phil?
Hell yes. For at least 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Okay. Until we get to UFC Fight Night Vieira versus Tate.
Yeah, let me just click into the next future. Wow, looking good. The next Fight Night looking good. Oh. But that's fine.
No, let's celebrate the good times.
That's fine. That's for tomorrow. We'll cross that bridge and possibly burn it down when we come to it. UFC 267 is looking pretty fire, if I don't say so myself. Blachowicz-Teixeira is finally getting his second shot at the UFC light heavyweight title held by fellow old man Jan Blachowicz. It is a fight, Phil, that I thought was lost when they booked Blachowicz against Adesanya. I said, no. I pulled out all my hair. Why are they doing this? Glover has earned his title shot. This is the light heavyweight fight the fans want to see. And now we get it. Blachowicz shocked the world a second time, defending his title from one of the best kickboxers, the best kickboxer to ever make the transition to MMA. In frankly, a complete and utter shutout that Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier had no idea what they were looking at when they called it. Aside from that, classic old man fight in the main event, we have Petr Yan, almost bantamweight champion, taking on Yan-Sandhagen. Is this for an interim title?
Yes.
Okay, because Aljamain Sterling has continued to have issues. And at this point, I'm starting to wonder if he'll ever fight again. I don't know. The man has been through some psychological trauma, both that night and in the entire time after. The future of this division is uncertain, but I think most will agree Petr Yan has earned the title of best fighter in the division. And Yan-Sandhagen, Phil and I both agree, figures to be a really interesting and difficult test for him. So that is a fantastic fight, which really could be the main event if only seniority weren't so important to the UFC. Islam Makhachev versus Dan Hooker. Li Jingliang, the Leech, versus a finally returning Khamzat Chimaev. Magomed Ankalaev, also known as Kutalaba's Bane, taking on Volkan Oezdemir. It is a stacked main card. We're going to get to as much of it as we possibly can, and whatever doesn't fit into this episode is going to go into a bonus for our Patreon, along with whatever we have to say about last weekend's card, which itself, very entertaining on the prelims. Phil, I didn't lie about Gregory Rodriguez versus Jun Young Park. It was a banger.
You did not.
A middleweight classic. And then also, of course, had a fantastically stupid and entertaining main event. So all of that doesn't make it here on the Patreon. Let's forget about that for now and talk about the light heavyweight title on the line between defending champion Yan Blachowicz and defending restaurateur Glover Teixeira. Phil, are you excited?
I am. I mean, this is one of the rare ones where, on the one hand, if you like both guys, you might be sad that one of them has to lose.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, this isn't really one of those fights where you're like, oh, these guys are both fighting for their legacy as one of the greatest of all time, or anything kind of like that. This isn't quite like let's say, a Poirier-Holloway.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this might be a significant step back for either guy who loses, I mean, particularly if Poirier had lost that fight, let's say. He might have been relegated to just action fighter status.
Sure.
This is really one where you feel like both guys are just playing with house money.
Yeah.
There was no, as you kind of alluded to, there was no reason to expect that we were going to get here.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to end up with this light heavyweight fight. It seemed like they were hell-bent on it not happening. But, Yan is just that good and Glover is just that dogged. And, yeah, I mean, it just feels like this fantastic bonus that one of these guys will be walking out of here the improbable light heavyweight champion.
I just can't believe we got here. I don't know. Dreams do come true. It is one of those fights. It's just.
I will say that this also, and I'm not above the entertainment value for certain fights being helped by pettiness. I really like the way that two of MMA's most notorious dickheads in John Jones and Conor McGregor have got to see their weight classes sort of leave them behind a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the more satisfying things about it is that neither of them got left behind by some next generation of fighter.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, oh, well, I just got too old for the sport. Nope. It's contemporaries and people who are older than them.
Yeah. Yeah. In both cases.
John Jones struggled mightily with Dominic Reyes, and Yan, old, didn't used to be able to fight for 3 rounds. Yan Blachowicz knocked him the fuck out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yan of Rivia. If you pay attention, by the way, to the photo shoot he recently did, he has announced that his allegiance among the Witchers is to the School of the Cat, which is good to know. Good to nail that down once and for all.
Excellent.
So yeah, I mean, what do you see as the general picture of this fight? I think, in many ways it's a little clearer than the co-main event. Yan Blachowicz. Forget what the UFC commentary, particularly Joe Rogan, but also, Paul Felder, everyone seems bent on this idea that Yan Blachowicz is like a meathead's meathead. They talk about him like he's Ernie Shavers or some shit, like he is just some big ham-fisted puncher, which is crazy because Yan Blachowicz has for his entire career, while not adverse at all to exciting fights, been like a pace managing, neutralizing counter puncher, and outfighter. His primary weapons are like jabs and kicks, not gigantic slinging right hands, which generally only appear when the opponent, walks into them. So I think we have a potentially, this is just the icing on the cake for a matchup between two, lovable, nice, tenured veterans of the sport. I think we have a potentially very entertaining matchup here because Yan Blachowicz can be boring. I'm watching his fight with Jacare Souza even as we speak.
Oh my God.
But Glover Teixeira has never been boring and has arguably gotten less so, later in his career as he leans more and more, into sort of what is the like meta of every other division. That is being a high output pressure fighter. Who's going to look to drive Yan back against the fence, who's going to try to counter around his jabs and his kicks, and is going to try to take him down and beat him up. So we might have some protracted clinch exchanges or whatever, but I think we've got a nice sort of stylistic push and pull here. I think it figures to be a largely entertaining fight.
I mean, it is in many ways just a real two true outcome fight, isn't it?
Yeah. Two true outcome, yes.
Because we've seen Jan Blachowicz falter to powerful, protracted wrestling-based fighters before, where he just got drowned and outpaced. And his sole example of really beating that archetype is, as you've mentioned, the aforementioned abysmal fight against a fairly shot Jacare Souza.
Yeah. Just this side of having his arm snapped into Jacare Souza.
Yeah. And whilst I think that scoring that fight for Jacare was indefensible, it also was pretty close and empty of offense in a way that a Glover-Teixeira fight is unlikely to be.
Yeah. So why do you think that is? You think Teixeira is just more reliable as a come-forward thrower of punches?
Yeah, essentially. And he's just like a bigger, he's like a natural light heavyweight who's been fighting at this weight class for a long time. He's going to throw more off clinch exchanges. I think Jacare can occasionally get locked into just, I'm just taking someone down. Mm-hmm. I'm just striking. And then and neglect the ancillary phases in a way which Teixeira doesn't necessarily. He's a much better dirty boxer.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the fact that Teixeira's going to be easier to hit than Jacare, though. But if you do, if you watch, for example, Blachowicz-Cummings, that is an absolute classic Glover-Teixeira fight from Patrick Cummings.
Yeah.
In that he gets absolutely, specifically a modern-day Glover-Teixeira fight.
Yeah.
In that he gets absolutely murdered and then just comes back. Someone on Twitter said something about, it was very apropos. I can't remember who it was. I don't remember if it was Dan Tom or someone in Dan Tom's comments, but saying that, Glover-Teixeira is the best person in mixed martial arts at turning, being dead into a winning grappling position.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have yourself, wondering whether Blachowicz can finish Teixeira due to how incredibly hittable he is, or whether if he tries, he ends up knackering himself in the same way that he did against Cummins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think it's worth sort of emphasizing the change that Jan Blachowicz has undergone. That was really that was the transitional period of Jan Blachowicz's career, where the when he lost that fight to Cummins, he was gassing out constantly. I think the seeds of that kind of downfall are still there. We have certainly seen Blachowicz huffing and puffing later into fights recently, but I don't think weirdly, this is actually a great parallel. I would say Blachowicz's performance against Cummins was very, very much like Anthony Smith's performance against Glover-Teixeira.
Mm-hmm. Just
going way, way too fast. And Anthony Smith, can maybe blame his corner for that one. I think a somewhat rare spot-on call from Daniel Cormier in that fight, having just rewatched it, where he does say, even before it becomes clear that Smith is slowing down, is his corner just constantly screaming at him to do different things, maybe bad? Maybe causing him to lose sight of the fact that this is a 5-round fight and pace is a genuine concern. That's the approach that Blachowicz took to Cummins. He had a guy pressuring him who was very hittable, and he just unloaded on him. And successful strikes fed him into further exchanges, and it reached a point where he was just done. He had destroyed himself before Cummins found any real sustained success in that fight. I don't think On the one hand, we've not seen him against as determined a pressure fighter or as determined a wrestler as Cummins since then. But neither have we seen him like lose sight of how much time there is left in the fight and how carefully or recklessly he should dole out his strikes. Like there have been plenty of fights that could have boiled out of control. And it wasn't just wrestlers, who used to get that response out of Blachowicz. He used to gas himself out a lot. And basically since the rematch with Jimmy Manuwa, who sort of fought like one of those wrestlers in their first fight, to dismal results, I think Blachowicz has become really, really good at managing his pace. It's a steady output. He will throw big blitzes, but they seem well chosen. Sort of like what we said about Aldo versus Munoz. You know, there were just, it was the same sort of, oh God, I need to scare you off with some big heavy swings response that is kind of baked in to the born and bred counterpuncher, but they were parceled out, and more like proactive. It's kind of the good side of the infamous Blachowicz blitz, the Blacko blitz, right? That like, obviously there are some weaknesses to that approach, but it is something Blachowicz has started doing more and more, I think, because it's like a proactive way to throw those big scary combinations without first letting the opponent start to overwhelm you and freak you out. It's like a, hey, I'm here, back the hell off. You can't just have your way with me kind of statement. All of these things come together for a much more consistent striker, in the current days of Blachowicz's career. So Glover-Teixeira is going to have to make that response happen, which he might be able to do still, right?
Yeah. So Teixeira has typically lost only to people who are very good wrestlers.
Yeah.
That is the general commonality. The worst wrestler he's lost to is prime Alexander Gustafsson, or maybe not quite. Actually,
it wasn't
quite
prime. It was like the last good performance of Gustafsson's career.
Yeah. That's the worst wrestler that he's lost to. Other than that, I mean, it's illuminating how much having the wrestling exchanges turned against him actually affects Glover.
Mm-hmm.
The Corey Anderson fight is like genuinely surprising at the time, and perhaps less so in retrospect. But it's the fact that once Teixeira's like pressure is broken by the fact that Anderson can dictate wrestling exchanges, the fight just goes totally out of the window in exactly the same way that it did to Davis a few years back.
Yeah.
So.
And the only way around that, as we saw in the Smith fight, is to bludgeon the opponent so thoroughly on the feet that they can no longer stop your takedowns. Because Smith did a perfectly fine job of, when we know what Teixeira's takedown game is, it's the snatch single leg. And then, run the pipe, crackdown type finish. That's like his typical go-to takedown, sequence. Anthony Smith shut those takedowns down, with ease. And it was only when he started to fade and get outstruck that Teixeira really started finding takedowns. So it's one way or the other. It's his wrestling has to function, which I think is a bigger question against this version of Blachowicz than it ever would have been before, or he has to weather a hell of a storm and get into some hideous, violent exchanges to get the fight into his wheelhouse.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the determining factor for who you pick in this fight, at least for me, is that it does feel like Teixeira's margins for getting his game running have thinned whilst Blachowicz's have grown. It's the fact that if, Anthony Smith is not a tremendous defensive wrestler. We've seen this against, what's his face? Big Rakic.
Right.
And he was still, as you said, still able to shut Glover out quite substantially in early going before he got knackered, and he largely lost the striking before he started losing the wrestling. So it does feel, and Glover has really had to walk through fire to get things working lately.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that he's so offensively potent, and the people that he's fighting are so offensively inert, I guess, or defensively inert in grappling situations, that has really made this work. But he's gotten badly hurt in every single one of his fights going back to Carl Roberson.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did Kutalaba hurt him? Was that one of the rare ones where Glover just annihilated him? I can't actually remember.
I can't either. I'd have to look at it. I wouldn't put it outside the realm of possibility. In fact, I can't tell if I'm mixing up my head with the Cannonier fight. But I think Kutalaba may have bludgeoned him with a huge shot and then burned himself out. I think that seems like a reasonable way for that fight to go for both guys. Here, I'll go ahead and pull it up.
I mean, many people did not score. To be honest, I'd almost forgotten this fight. The Krylov fight for Teixeira.
I did. I mean, I thought he won it. There was one thing that happens in that fight, actually, that I can really see being replicated here, though. Krylov almost submits Teixeira in the first round.
Uh-huh.
He gets between positions rear naked choke, which is off of Teixeira going for like a head outside single, which is a move Blachowicz loves. he actually submitted, Devin Clark with that, and he has attempted it on several other people since. It didn't work out for Krylov. It put him into a grappling exchange when he committed to the choke and tried to take the back, and Teixeira ended up just keeping a slow old man scramble going, slipping him off the top of back mount and getting on top of him. But that's just one very specific sequence I could definitely see playing out here. I think Blachowicz is wiser than Krylov. Like we've seen him go for that move before. I don't think he's the type to commit to a bad position. If he feels that choke starting to slip away, I think he lets it go and disengages. My question is, Phil, like, so suppose Teixeira reaches for his singles. Suppose he's losing the striking exchanges early, getting jabbed up, getting outmaneuvered a bit. And Blachowicz, what I'm expecting is for Blachowicz to largely just like look for his underhook and drag him up into the clinch, which is what he did repeatedly in the Jacare fight. What happens then? Who's a better clinch fighter? Because this is a crazy parallel to draw, but the only parallel I can think for a fight where that has happened repeatedly over the course of the bout was Teixeira Jones. And Jones is absolutely a better, more destructive clinch fighter than Jan Blachowicz. Though Jan can land some cracking shots on the brakes, as Luke Rockhold found out. But what happens then? Like, that's sort of the between. If we're saying it's a 2 true outcome fight, that's outcome 3. Is it as bad as the Jacare fight if that happens repeatedly?
You know what? Looking through Teixeira's like resume, I'm not sure that he is that much more active in the clinch than Jacare, you know? I think I might have missold him.
Mm-hmm.
He's happy to sort of push his head into the person and like throw combinations. But when it comes to actually disengaging and striking, Jan might actually be better than him. Like, as you said, he strikes on the break more consistently.
Mm-hmm. He's still not super active.
Neither of them are active at all, let's be honest.
Yeah. Jan this has been a big part of his success lately, but he's very, very focused on takedown defense in those engagements. Mm-hmm. Just keeping his underhook and slowly working to a position where he feels he can spin out.
Takedown defense and not working too hard.
Yes. That's a big part of modern day. That is, by the way, no one's caught on to this. That is the one way in which he is like the Derek Lewis that the commentators seem to confuse him for. The secret to his success is not doing too much.
Yeah, I think there's a few outcomes. We can get a dreadful clinch slog, in the way that we did in the Jacare fight.
Yeah.
We can get Glover. We can get the Patrick Cummings fight. We can get Glover getting picked off for several rounds. Or we can get Glover, and I think this is a significant possibility, getting instantly iced.
Yeah, by the way, you'll want to know that what happens in Teixeira's fight with Iwan Kutalaba is this is just the only way it really could have happened now that I look back at it. A spinning back fist staggers Glover, and then I'm pretty sure, illegal knee to the face as Glover is on the ground.
Oh man, I love Iwan Kutalaba.
That's the sequence that Kutalaba destroys himself in his effort to destroy Glover.
A fantastic matchup.
Yeah. So, and I'm sorry, continue with your, I'm actually worried now that the more we talk about this, that I have oversold it as an entertaining matchup. I mean, there is a not insignificant chance that we end up with a protracted clinch battle.
Again, it's house money.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I'm happy for it. I don't give a damn.
Yeah. At this point, I genuinely don't care what they give us.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like if someone it's like my rule for exciting fights. If someone ever gives you a fight of the year candidate, they can do whatever they like from that point on.
Mm-hmm.
It was like when Eddie Alvarez was like having stinkers against Melendez and Bettis, and people were like, "Rah, rah," and I was like, no, Eddie Alvarez can do what he likes.
He's Eddie Alvarez. Yeah.
Similarly, like at this point in their careers, they can do whatever. They've got to the belt. They can do whatever they want.
Yep.
I will be fascinated. I will not necessarily expect other people to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick.
I'm sorry.
Ooh.
I just watched Kutalaba eat a left hook to the body and then very obviously pretend to be hurt to the body before selling out on an equally obvious right hand. Oh man. What a gem. Sorry. Make your pick.
Hasn't he on this card? Yeah, no, I think I'm going to pick Blachowicz probably by like second round knockout.
Really?
I think Teixeira's just been hurt too many times. Like,
yeah.
He got killed like 4 times against Thiago.
Yeah.
He's been borderline knocked out like 8 times in his last 4 fights.
Yeah, I mean, I think the saving grace is for Blachowicz is his insistence on not doing too much. Like, if he doesn't get that knockout, he's less likely than any of these other guys to waste himself chasing the finish. Yep. I think he'll be more than, I mean, again, the Manawa fight was like the turning point in his career. And in that one, he had Manawa terribly hurt several times. Third round, mostly Blachowicz just staying on his jab and winning.
Yeah, you're convincing me. Ugly decision. I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take Blachowicz as well. I definitely think there's reason to think Teixeira, this is a fight for him that, Blachowicz's biggest losses in his career have been to wrestlers. Teixeira has continued to be incredibly tough. He's got a diverse enough game that he's not just a wrestler. That he can actually make some wild exchanges happen. But I think Blachowicz is just too, if I'm looking at two guys like growing into old man versions of their games, Blachowicz is the more assured. You know, his fights don't require him to almost die every time, before he gets to the kind of fight that favors him. That they have in fact become much safer and more, not even always cautious, just like, just more assured.
Controlled.
Yeah, very controlled. And Teixeira's wins lately have just been such a light heavyweight thing, where like he has just relied on getting a bunch of opponents who ruin themselves. And if that hadn't happened, how many of these beatdowns would he have been able to turn around? So supposing that Blachowicz doesn't make a terrible mistake, which I trust him not to. I think he might get some exciting moments early and then win the remainder of a somewhat boring, ugly decision. So I'll take him by decision. I think that's the way to go. Okay, let's take a break then. When we come back, almost inarguably the best matchup on the card. I think a tantalizing matchup. Petr Yan, the nearly UFC bantamweight champion, taking on Corey Sandhagen in what figures to be, no doubts about this one, an extremely exciting fight. We'll get to that and the rest of UFC 267 after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. As promised, the co-main event of UFC 267, Petr Yan, Corey Sandhagen. When was it, Phil? There was another card where we had two guys named Yan. And it just so happens that it was the easier part. It's for one guy, it's a first name. For the other guy, it's a surname, but it's the easier part of their name to say. So we just ended up calling them both Yan over and over again. Yeah. It was the Adesanya Blachowicz card. Petr Yan fought Aljamain Sterling on that one. Wonderful.
So a very, very good card.
Yes. Yes, it was. What do you make of this co-main event? Petr Yan, Corey Sandhagen. Should we start off on the right foot by just sort of announcing our allegiances here? People have sort of picked up on this, the sort of subtext of our past.
We hate Russia.
We hate Russia, and Petr Yan specifically. All my homies hate Petr Yan.
We spent so long hating Khabib that now it's time to just transfer over to hating Yan.
Yeah. And I'm well ahead of that, you know. There's no transferring left to do. I loathe this man.
Bastard.
So yeah, I don't know how wholeheartedly I can lean into this bit. There is a thing where, like, here's the context for this. Petr Yan is a fantastically good fighter.
Mm-hmm.
He's incredibly good. He's one of the most well-rounded fighters in the entire sport. He's a devastating puncher. He's a technician. He can make great adjustments, and he's tough as shit. He hits,
and he's an incredibly good wrestler. He can fight from either stance, and et cetera, et cetera.
He's so flexible and well versed at everything, and dangerous and exciting. You know, never puts on a dull fight. His dullest fights are like only dull in comparison to all the rest of them. They stand out simply because they aren't absolutely brutally violent and exciting. And there are very few of those. But man, like, he is a human being. I know that's going to be shocking to certain segments of Petr Yan's rabid Twitter fan base. But, like, there are things you can do against Petr Yan that are effective. You don't get a lot of exciting fights by not letting anybody have any moments against you. If anything, it's more of a credit to his ability to make the right reads and adjust. That he has had so many exciting fights that he has nonetheless won against the likes of Jose Aldo. Aljamain Sterling fight. Yes, I'm going to say it. He had some issues in that fight. Ended up dominating it. But, you know, before even the halfway point, pretty much completely in his control, though. We are going to talk about some of the things Sterling did there. That might sort of transfer over to Sandhagen's chances against Yan on this card. You know, he's just a man, folks. He's not Jose Aldo, he says, knowing that he just beat Jose Aldo. He's not perfect, okay? That's really the context of this. So, yes, if it has to be this way, I hate Petr Yan. Phil hates Petr Yan. That's it. We've set the stage. He sucks. Ignore everything else I just said. He's a piece of shit. He's terrible at fighting. Now, why is Corey Sandhagen going to beat him? Phil, go.
Well, This reminds me of one of my a not very good pick I made once, which is because this really reminds me of one particular fight that got made, which back in the day, which is Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit. And it is one of those fights where Condit got called up for the title fight, and he didn't really deserve it. Honestly, on merit, considering who else was in the division at the time. I can't remember who else it could have been at the time, but they were obviously just like, it's been around for ages. People know him, for robbing Nick Diaz and maybe some other stuff. And it'll be a good fight.
He'd lost GSP as completely as anyone else, but had a bigger moment than basically anyone else except Johnny Hendricks had.
Mm-hmm. And so they were like, yeah, just chuck him in there with Lawler. It'll be fire, and it was. I remember when it came for me to pick that fight, I sat down and I was like, Robbie Lawler is better at everything than Carlos Condit. He is better in almost every conceivable metric of MMA. He is a harder puncher. He's better defensively. He is a better defensive wrestler. He's a better offensive wrestler, probably. Maybe Carlos Condit had a better chin, but even then, it's it's up in the air. And so I sort of just picked Robbie Lawler with a reasonable amount of confidence, and that sort of carried through into the fight itself. I found myself scoring it for Robbie Lawler, even though in retrospect I've rescored it. He really doesn't win that fight. He really doesn't. You have to really try and find a win for Robbie Lawler in there.
We'll talk about
this later.
We'll talk about this later. I'm not happy with you, but
he's behind by 100 strikes at the end of that fight.
That's fine. I really don't mind that statement. Anyway, my hatred is currently focused on Petr Yan, so you're safe. Say as many inflammatory things as you want.
Yeah, okay. This is my long-winded point. All of that was kind of true. Robbie Lawler is better at all of those things. But it didn't really make a difference because Robbie Lawler wasn't ever going to fight Carlos Condit in a way that was going to make him massively likely to win that fight.
Yeah.
In the same way, Petr Yan is probably better in almost every facet of MMA than Corey Sandhagen is.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if that makes for I'm not sure if the way that they fight means that translates into a particularly convincing Yan win.
Yeah, it's a style thing. Fighters are both more and less than the sums of their parts. It's a style dictates how a fight plays out. I think I'll just go ahead and say what you said to me before the show. You told me that Corey Sandhagen might be the very toughest fight in the division for Petr Yan. I don't think that means it's unwinnable. It's not like Robbie Lawler was shut out by Carlos Condit. He still got those big moments. There's still a case for him winning. You may disagree with it, but you can still see what the judges were seeing and what you were even seeing watching live at the time. And Petr Yan is a tremendously good fighter. In a lot of ways, better than Robbie Lawler. We've seen,
yeah.
He doesn't have Robbie Lawler's very specific allergy to high output, for example, at all, as far as I know. But Corey Sandhagen is a tough fight for him, possibly the toughest in the division, and I agree with that. I think, yeah. So go on.
I've always thought that, even around the Dillashaw fight where we both picked Sandhagen. We both picked Dillashaw.
Mm-hmm.
I would still comfortably pick Yan over Dillashaw.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Sandhagen is just specifically troublesome for Yan in a lot of ways, and I've heard people, saying these ways that Yan can get to Sandhagen, and I'm not sure if they're really particularly Petr Yan ways of fighting. Like, if they're really the consistent way that he tends to go about his business. So, like things like low kicks or consistent takedowns, and I'm like, is he really like a consistent takedown threat in the way that, say, like a Dillashaw or a Cruz is? Or is he like an opportunistic inch takedown threat?
Yeah, I mean, he'll hit at least one or two really pretty takedowns in every fight, but it rarely has it been a real focus of how he seems to approach the fight.
Similarly, like things like low kicks, I'm just like, is this really how Peter Yan fights, or are you pasting sort of protean ideals of how you think Peter Yan should fight onto him?
Because the base level understanding, which is true to an extent, is that Petr Yan can do it all. And again, I want to emphasize that is true. I think Petr Yan is maybe one of the, if how a fighter performed was just determined by all the things he can do, he might be the most moldable fighter of all time to any game plan. He's so well rounded and like at a supremely high level of skill in every single phase, every level of attack. But the bigger question I think you're getting at is like, does he game plan around these things? Have we ever seen that?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about this one is, how is someone's game plan built by the range they want to fight in? Because Peter Yan is a pressure fighter.
Yeah. In
that he will get to his exchanging distance, and he will basically build on his reads until he has crushed the opponent and wrestle him. He will simply stuff it or fuck them up in the clinch, and eventually he will drown them. He's too durable. He is too powerful. His pace is too high. He has too many weapons. Thing is that, like, and this is, I think, a lot of what the Lawler issue was, and why I see a lot of parallels here, is that the distance that people choose to fight, the distance and the directionality that people choose to fight at is different depending on what kind of pressure fighter they are. Because Robbie Lawler is closing to exchange range in the same way that Peter Yan is. He wants to get to the limit of his reach, and then he will sit there. What this did to Robbie Lawler was that against lots of big, tall people, he would sort of walk his way through their effective range. They would often just sort of piece him up on the way in. Like big, long people who could kick at him, like Babalu, or in fact, as it turned out, Condit or Larkin. And this is sort of how Peter Yan is as well. Like, the Jose Aldo fight is really illuminating in that Bisping was talking, they're not using any footwork. Of course they were. But this was a fight where they both wanted the same distance. Thus, there was no directionality to it.
Yeah.
Like, they would both just like, oh yeah, this is where I want to be. And then they stood there, and then they exchanged techniques until one of them won.
It's like Lawler Hendricks, to continue the Robbie Lawler comparison.
Exactly.
Their first fight, they both got to the range they wanted, and so a lot of it just had the feeling of them standing remarkably close to each other, seeing who could outfight the other. Go on.
I think a lot of Jan's pressure is built around getting to his exchanging distance.
Yeah.
The problem is, Corey Sandhagen, like many of the people who troubled Robbie Lawler in the past, is very long and very diverse. This is a very reductive way of putting it, but if Jans is not pushing through space, as in driving Sandhagen back like, say, a Dillashaw might by, blasting at him in either a take with a level change or something like that. And again, Yan will do this. Not, I would say, to the extent that a Dillashaw does. It's not the best thing that Peter Yan does. It's his bailout.
Yeah. Like in the Rivera fight.
Yeah, it's his. He would not do this if he has the choice not to.
In some ways, that could be better, right? That he's not just constantly barreling forward, which it can be both a positive and a negative for someone like Dillashaw, running into strikes over and over as he was for long stretches of that Sandhagen fight. Yan will pick his moments to really surprise the opponent by crashing in with a long extended combination.
Absolutely. But in his tendency to rigorously work for his distance works very well against someone like a Dodson, or in fact, I think like a Dillashaw, someone who wants to blitz at him because he will constantly be fighting at an uncomfortable distance for them. Not sure whether it works very well against someone who is, again, all and diverse and fights from volume. And that's sort of, I think, what you were alluding to, kind of what we saw in the striking exchanges with Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah, so my, in retrospect, looks like probably the worst fight prediction of all time. Because, again, by the end of that fight, Sterling was getting absolutely thrashed, and basically the entire time had some of the worst body language I think I've ever seen in a title fight. He just hated it. It was clear. The moment really, really got to him. Petr Yan got to him. He didn't like the fact that Yan could out-wrestle him in spots. He didn't like the pace that his corner was insisting he fight at, and did not feel comfortable staying back at range. That is an interesting contrast with Sandhagen. I think in a lot of ways, Aljamain Sterling, he really thought he had to pressure and be doing stuff constantly. And didn't like that. He would have, I think, much preferred a more controlled pace. I went into that one having seen his fight with Pedro Munoz, expecting something a little more like that. Not being so insistent on pressing forward, but just sort of trying to keep Petr Yan at bay, use that inexorable but fairly gradual forward movement against him. Use his high...
We'll remind you did pick Petr Yan.
Did I? Oh, thank goodness. I'm not as stupid as I thought.
I picked Sterling.
No, you're as stupid as I thought I was. But I don't want people to overlook the fact that despite the body language, despite the trajectory of the fight, almost the entire time Aljamain Sterling was having moments that sort of transfer into what Corey Sandhagen does, and actually does comfortably and well, consistently from one round to the next, in a way that Sterling, outside of the Pedro Munoz fight, never really has.
Even in the Pedro Munoz fight, it was skating.
Very shaky fight. I mean, it's barely this side of controlled, and really goes to the wrong side of that line on several occasions. It was a big stride, I think, for Sterling. But Munoz is a much simpler, less sophisticated fighter than Petr Yan, and isn't capable of surprising somebody like Sterling to the extent that Yan did. And also, I don't know. Sterling had never fought for a title before. I think that may have gotten to him as well. But yeah, I don't want people to forget the fact, just because Petr Yan so clearly won every single round, that Aljamain Sterling...
Did he clearly win every single round?
Probably. I mean, the first round was Aljamain Sterling's best. He has a lot of success, but he gets dropped. So probably.
He did fine in the second round, as far as I can recall. Yeah, he was clearly well on his way to getting knocked out.
Yeah,
by
the body language was awful. That's fair. That's fair. But it's Petr Yan's fight. That much is very clear. But Aljamain Sterling has success with a lot of things. He, first of all, range. His reach is far greater than that of Petr Yan's. His height is greater than that of Petr Yan's. What was the number you gave me earlier? Corey Sandhagen is 3 inches taller than Sterling.
He's 4 inches. I think they're 5'7" and 5'11" respectively.
He's a much taller, longer fighter, more comfortable sitting behind that range. So that right there, just having the opportunity to land shots in volume from a range where Petr Yan is just not his ideal distance. It's a range where when things really aren't working for him, he will try to crash through it as quickly as possible, and otherwise tends to sort of inch his way past it behind that high guard. Aljamain Sterling has tons of success with body shots, which is something that both you and I called out before that fight. Petr Yan loves his tight high guard, and you can just work him to the body all day. Jose Aldo, I don't think he missed a single liver shot that he threw against Petr Yan. It's just there, and that is that's emphasized by the fact that Petr Yan, as you said, likes to stick in the pocket. So he's, it's not even like his head's a really difficult target to find, or his footwork is so quick, but the body is slower to move. No, he's just going to stand there a lot of the time. So if you get that high guard up, you can hit him to the body. Corey Sandhagen loves doing that. He does it significantly better than Aljamain Sterling. What was the other strike Aljamain Sterling landed multiple times on Petr Yan? Flying knees. Corey Sandhagen's got a pretty good one of those. He fucking smashed TJ Dillashaw's face with one. He knocked Frankie Edgar dead with a single flying knee. He is devastatingly accurate with that move. It's not a low-risk move. Could definitely be turned against you. But again, Petr Yan, relatively planted in middle distance, ducking down and covering up as his first two defensive reactions to most strikes. That is his one-size-fits-all defense when he doesn't know exactly what's coming at him. That's flying knee city. So yeah, a lot of these tactical things that Sterling definitely did find success with while panicking the entire time, they seem to fit really well into what Corey Sandhagen does, and I assume will do much more comfortably and confidently. He certainly didn't look, it wasn't a title fight. He didn't look shaken at all against TJ Dillashaw, though. Sandhagen does seem to I don't know. I have a little more faith in him to rise to the occasion than Aljamain Sterling. It's been a much more gradual and steady path to the top for him than Sterling's was.
Yeah, and fundamentally he will be able to fight the fight in his preferred wheelhouse.
Yeah.
As with Sterling, it became almost immediately apparent that he was not going to be out wrestling Petr Yan.
Right. Now.
That he was going to have to pretty much strike with him the whole fight, and he then burned solid half of his gas tank on takedowns, which either weren't going to come or, even worse, got turned into humiliating trips.
Yeah. And that's just Corey Sandhagen. I don't think gives a shit about that. In fact, quite the opposite. He'd much rather be striking, even getting hit striking, than he would be losing a grappling exchange. This is a guy who, 10 fights into his career, took on John Lineker and won.
We've been talking a lot about how much Petr Yan sucks. Let's talk about how much Sandhagen sucks, though.
Yeah. About that wrestling. About that wrestling, or is there something else you want to hit first?
So there's three basic things that are pretty clear. The wrestling, the spinning and back turning.
That worked really well for Sterling. Speaking of things, speaking of things that Sterling found success with, spinning desperately and constantly was not one of them.
Will say. Mm-hmm. It may be harder for Yan to hit those takedowns simply because Corey Sandhagen is extremely tall.
Yeah.
Dillashaw, it might have been because his knee wasn't all in one piece.
Sure.
Actually struggled to convert a lot of those back takes that he got on Sandhagen. But it was a bad look.
Just to underscore that point, Fight Metric, for what it's worth, it credits Dillashaw with 19 takedown attempts and only 2 completed takedowns.
Yeah.
So he gave up his back a shitload, but did not, in fact, get taken down very often. Those long posts are useful. Still.
As a prolific body puncher, and a decent mid kicker, but also as someone who will try and head kick people off the clinch. wouldn't be surprised to get Sandhagen get domed doing that at some point.
Nope. Yan is really, really good at those strikes on the break.
The other thing about Sandhagen, though, which is interesting, his cagecraft, and I think the way that he's fighting now, I think he has, because we mentioned before so the Dillashaw fight is a real mixed bag here. So we mentioned before the fight, it basically comes down to who can go forward, and Sandhagen went backwards the whole time, pretty much.
Yeah, he did it
not entirely.
With the back turning and stuff being an exception, he did it pretty damn well. Better, I think, than we expected him to be able to.
Yeah. So, but this is real mixed bag stuff for Yan, because he's very good at getting people against the fence and then destroying them, and but B, Sandhagen has proved that he's surviving and getting more comfortable in that kind of match. I think it is probably, I would say net. I would put it as a negative for Sandhagen. Do not think he should try and fight Yan with his back to the fence like he did TJ Dillashaw.
Yep.
And that's sort of 2 fights in a row that we've seen that from him, in that he's much more building a counter-punching style, which you can see you might want to do if you're a tall guy.
Sure.
But particularly a tall guy without great wrestling defense who's fighting wrestlers.
I don't think
that might be some of it.
I don't think it's impossible that he does get some pressure in this fight. What I'm expecting in really broad terms is Sandhagen to have a shockingly good start. It's going to be, Petr Yan is not the fastest starter in the world typically. He often likes to get a look at his opponent, and the way his style functions, again, it's not a lot of dashing, trying to trap the opponent right away. It is measured, inexorable forward movement, inching his way into the pocket until you realize that he's just been there for the last 5 minutes of the fight and you can't seem to get rid of him anymore. Sandhagen's reach is going to have moments there. Petr Yan, while best is a pressure fighter, it's not like he's completely unwilling to back up if that feels like the right move. He is, again, an incredibly flexible fighter. Corey Sandhagen will pressure if the opponent concedes ground. He will keep that reach in his opponent's face if they're trying to back up to get away from it. So I do think Corey Sandhagen probably will get some opportunities to pressure early and may in fact do so for a slightly extended period. When it comes down to it, though, Petr Yan is going to start backing him off, start moving into closer range with him, and Sandhagen is, as you said, and as we've seen, he is going to give ground. He's going to try to evade, which means he's going to start showing his back more. God forbid if Petr Yan does pick up on the low kicks. Again, it's not something he really game plans around that much, but he does throw them well. Again, Aljamain Sterling, he ripped that dude's legs out from under him more than once in the very first round of the fight. Sandhagen will be exposed to those. That's redoubled by the consistency with which he turns his back to his opponent. Boy, let me tell you something, Phil. I would love, because Sandhagen has made strides. I would love this to be his breakout pivoting performance. That would solve so many of these issues if he was just always facing the man he's fighting, even as he's moving around and evading them. It is possible. You can do it. So I'd love to see it. But given that we haven't seen it before, those do figure to be windows for Petr Yan to work his way into this fight as it goes on.
Yeah.
He's also, I think, just more durable, and, well, I don't know if that's true. Corey Sandhagen is incredibly durable.
I would have not seen Sandhagen. I guess there's the Lineker fight. I was going to say I haven't really seen him tested as much as...
He's eaten some big shots. Dillashaw is not an insignificant puncher, and he hit him plenty. Marlon Moraes, he didn't really land a lot. But there's Lineker... and there was also Yuri Alcantara, where he did get fucked up.
Yeah.
But not enough to get him out of there. They're both...
I don't know if... Yeah.
Yan's
ever been fucked up that bad.
No, he's super fucking durable. He's unbelievably tough.
He took Jose Aldo's best shots and his then career highest volume.
He won
utterly unfazed at the end of it.
Yeah, and he won assuredly. Well, we have our doubts about it, but he still won while looking like physically comfortable largely on the wrong side of one of Jimmy Rivera's best performances. Jimmy Rivera is no joke as a puncher either, especially not if you're walking into his counters, as Yan did many times in that fight. And didn't get shaken up even once that I can recall.
I think he might have got shaken up. John Dodson dropped him pretty bad, did he not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, flash knockdown. Still recovered remarkably well.
Yeah.
But these are both really, really durable fighters. So I don't know. I mean, this is a tantalizing sort of outline for the fight. I think you, at the beginning of this segment, laid out a really, really good parallel with the Robbie Lawler comparison and why Sandhagen looks like such a tough matchup for Petr Yan. Just having so many options at a range that Yan would rather not have to fight at most of the time. Being able to maintain that distance and having the diversity of attack, having the kicks and the knees, having the body shots, the quick hands capable of throwing combinations, and the jab. Having all of those options at that range that Petr Yan would rather just sort of tiptoe his way through means a lot of time for Corey Sandhagen to rack up points. But can he keep it going for 3 of 5 rounds and not get finished if he does so? I mean, again, I don't think it's impossible he gets a lot of success and turns his back on Yan, gets instantly foot sweeped. I know you've said the frame makes him somewhat hard to deal with, but I think Petr Yan is in being a more opportunistic sort of wrestler, probably has a better shot of turning those fleeting moments, those fleeting positions into actual takedowns than TJ Dillashaw did. And Yan is a monster on the ground. And again, if we're going to talk about the Jimmy Rivera fight, or the Jose Aldo one, he will keep experimenting and looking for the finish if things aren't going his way. So I don't think it's at all unlikely, if Petr Yan doesn't have a ton of success early, that he ends up submitting Corey Sandhagen or beating him to a pulp on the ground in the later rounds.
Yeah, this is the thing with Petr Yan, is that almost every area of MMA is available to him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I don't think he's going to have a low kick heavy attack against Corey Sandhagen. Not because I don't think Yan is a good low kick, because I know that he is.
Yeah.
Similarly, like most of Petr Yan's takedowns tend to be opportunistic off like angular clinch exchanges. Well, he'll either take the back or foot sweep from the side. Can Petr Yan hit a good double leg? Yes, he can. It's been a while since I've seen him do it.
He could do it all.
I think like Douglas Da Silva. I think he hit a really pretty level change takedown on him
and fucking destroyed him on the ground.
Yeah. He really can do it all, but I think that I think that his preference and his pride and how he thinks that how he wants fights to go make this uniquely challenging fight for him, and one that I honestly expect to be like kind of a disgusting war. And I tend to mirror your thoughts. It's that probably get I think we get Sandhagen early and probably Yan late.
Mm-hmm.
I think once Yan's body punches and attritional work come alive,
something Dillashaw
he's just got a lot of body to hit.
Yeah, and something Dillashaw could have taken
once
advantage
John
of.
Lineker really started going after him.
Right.
That was, he couldn't stand up to that for that long. He was starting to fade out a bit.
Something
I think Yan can replicate that.
Could have gone after a lot more and didn't. Dillashaw tends to be a headhunter. Yan is not. Yeah, so that's the thing, is like I'm kind of leaning Sandhagen. But I think if somebody gets a finish, it's a hell of a lot more likely to be Petr Yan. A hell of a lot. And I think it could be a pretty sharp turn when Yan starts to find those moments. If he realizes the body works, say about halfway through the fight, if not earlier, and starts just wilting Corey Sandhagen, if he finds the low kicks and continues pressing them, if he gets to the wrestling and starts just dismissively throwing Corey Sandhagen around, or God forbid, gets a strong top position and spends half of one round just blasting him in the face with ground and pound. I don't know. I on the one hand, I feel like it's Corey Sandhagen's, it's Petr Yan's, I agree with you, it's Petr Yan's toughest fight in the division. On the other hand, I don't know if Corey Sandhagen can survive it.
I mean, this is, you can say, you could say that, like, Leon Edwards might be Kamaru Usman's toughest fight in the division.
Right.
Neither of us would pick him to win it.
No. Because at some point, he's going to make the other guy, who's just a born killer, really fucking mad. Like that Jimmy Rivera fight, man. I know both of you and I have both very controversially said we think Jimmy Rivera you could call him the winner and that we might pick him in a rematch. But like, who's the one doing the murderous things in that fight? It's Petr Yan. He's a scary dude. And as long as one of those strikes with murderous intentions doesn't come while Corey Sandhagen is very obviously on his knees, that might be enough. Even if the fight does go worst case scenario for Petr Yan, even if the early rounds are really tough on him, he's a fucking warrior, man. Like Sandhagen is too, but there's something different about Petr Yan. I think he might be an actual murderer. Like there's just he never ever loses faith that he can stop you, ever. He's never satisfied that he's going to like get a decision. He likes finishing people. He likes bullying them and breaking them in a way that I just don't necessarily think Sandhagen does. I don't think Petr Yan views this as like a competition in the way that Sandhagen does. There is a psychological difference there. So, I mean, fuck it. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pick Corey Sandhagen because it's fun. And I think there's a chance of him banking an early round and then winning a couple more as the fight goes on. And maybe he suffers through a horrible moment but is tough enough to survive and still comes out with like a split decision. I think it stands a very good chance of going the distance. If somebody gets a finish, it's going to be Petr Yan. But I think Sandhagen's going to have a strong start. I think,
honestly, these are two incredibly dynamic fighters.
Yeah.
I think they're both also insanely durable, but I think the chances of either one of them picking up a finish are not necessarily that small.
True. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's going to be quite close, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
I think this has genuine like fight of the year potential, like one of the best fights ever kind of potential. Just the way these two match up, the fact that they pace they fight at, the durability, everything about it. Guess I'll take Yan.
Yeah.
Just for the. I do think he'll struggle early, but I think, I agree he has more of a chance of finishing. I like him down the stretch, but it's a very hard fight to call.
It's just a very nerve-wracking proposition to say that, like, oh, Corey Sandhagen is going to have the kind of success that gives Petr Yan no choice but to try killing him. Like, again, I almost feel like my pick is just wrong from the outset because, like, the more success Sandhagen has, there's a feeling that Petr Yan it's just going to worsen the comeback. And
did you not start this episode telling people not to immortalize Peter Yan?
Yeah.
And yet.
But, you get into this ephemeral territory, which is, yes, he's human. Like as a physical being, he's human.
Is he?
But is he? He's really scary, Phil. I am genuinely scared of Petr Yan. Anger always comes out of fear, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. But I will say it will be funny if Petr Yan loses, it will at least be very funny.
Oh yeah.
Because it will absolutely cement his worst brain thinking award.
Yes.
Throwing the Aljo fight away.
Yes.
All he will have done is clean out one of Aljo's worst matchups in Jose Aldo.
Yeah.
And then find a way to not get into the not get the rematch and end up fighting his worst style matchup in the division instead.
Yeah, and give a rematch for the title to Yan-Sandhagen, who lost to Aljo in a minute.
Boy, got Aldo out of there. You don't need to worry about his takedown defense.
Yep.
Got you the guy who gives his back up the whole time. Got you, my dude.
Fingers crossed. I'm here for the chaos that will ensue. That's half the reason to pick Sandhagen, I think. Good discussion though. I'm really, really looking forward to this fight. It's just going to be a banger. There's no way it isn't. I don't ever want to be too confident with these things, but I mean, look at these two. It's just, they're going to bring the best and the absolute evilest worst out of each other. Okay.
Even with the comedy value, though, I will be devastated if Sandhagen flying knees Yan of the gate.
No, yeah, don't let it be too quick. Anything but that.
Not like we've seen cool early flying stuff, knockout things from Yukori. They were fine. Don't do it again.
Yeah, that's something you do on the way up. Now's the time to deliver some truly horrific, life-changing wars. Fingers crossed. Okay, let's take a break then. We do not have a ton of time after we came back, though I'm very glad we invested so much of the time of this episode into that fight in particular. But when we return, which of these do we want to focus on first, Phil? Makhachev-Hooker, Leech Chimaev, or Ankalaev Uzdemir?
I think Makhachev-Hooker is probably the most interesting one.
Okay. So, Makhachev-Hooker after this, and everything else from that main card I just mentioned. I will once again remind you, check out Heavy Hands Patreon. Anyway, segment 3 coming up. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Islam Makhachev, Dan Hooker. As far as I know, Phil, Dan Hooker's line for this matchup has been, he's human. He wants to prove Islam Makhachev is human. I think the way we look at Islam Makhachev, we're aware of nothing more than his humanity, because he is, in our minds, the anti-Khabib. He's Bizarro Khabib. He's super athlete Khabib's completely dorky little brother.
He's the Sergio to his Anthony.
Exactly. He is almost like, he is almost entirely human, I think, in our conception. Among the best humans, but very much immortal compared to the other incredible athletes that have come out of his stable. Islam Makhachev is, Sergio to Anthony is the best comparison. He is the one who is technical at all times because he has to be. A lot of the things in his game are analogous to Khabib's skill set. Certainly, once he starts out grappling people, the positions that he chases, the so-called Dagestani handcuff, that cross wrist riding control, locking down one leg. He has this very modern MMA grappling way of sort of locking people in a half position, whether it's like that 3/4 mount, whether it's a one hook in ride against the fence, whether it's the cross wrist, these positions where you have, like two ways you can go and neither of them are good. And so he just lets you sit there worrying over that decision while in a very not quite as impressive as Khabib way, he pecks away with his strikes. And ultimately, when all goes according to plan, you take one of those escape routes he knows you have to take and he submits you. But he's not a great athlete. He doesn't hit particularly hard. I don't think he's incredibly durable. We have seen multiple instances outside of his one actual KO loss back in 2015 to Adriano Martins of him doing perfectly well in a fight, and then having one moment where he gets staggered or stunned and has to kind of collect himself. So Dan Hooker, dangerous. Is that enough to pick him? Dangerous and, let me add, not a stocky grappler, which was what you said. Makhachev has largely just sort of beaten up on stocky grapplers.
With the exception of, Rudoba was...
Stocky striker.
Yeah.
Well, who also, likes to grapple more than is good for him sometimes.
Yeah, also not someone who's particularly going to struggle with an opponent who can wrestle good. As I think we said at the time.
Yeah.
Rudoba has pretty much lost to every. So it's been a weirdly, it's been a weirdly kind of soft path up the division for Makhachev.
Yeah. Which is
not in so many ways.
Yeah.
Tsarukian has had something sort of broadly similar after they fought each other.
Mm-hmm.
Both kind of fighting very similar guys. And Hooker is someone with a much more, let's say, MMA-defined style.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a pure striker or a pure grappler. He is, as we've mentioned before, he's a level change attack guy in many ways, but is also a distance striker in a way that Rudoba is not.
Yeah.
So this is a genuine challenge because if Makhachev wants to hide behind his jab and fight from a distance, it's not Thiago Moises who's just going to sit there waiting for a single hook that he can counter with.
Right.
This is someone with their own nasty jab and low kick game. And if he changes levels, Hooker has a nasty guillotine, step knee, and so on. Also, one of the things about Makhachev fighting grapplers, he's shown he's very good at getting takedowns.
Yep.
Without putting himself into any kind of submission danger whatsoever.
Yep. Super composed. Again, that's the Khabibiness of his game. Just exceptionally methodical and direct in his method in getting to these strong sort of transitional control positions. And that is something I think the obvious the first look at this fight is Makhachev has been fighting all these guys of a certain kind of type, or ones who don't fit that mold, have a pretty glaring weakness to his game, and Dan Hooker isn't that guy. That's the obvious first read. But on Dan Hooker's side, who's a parallel for Islam Makhachev? Who's a guy that Dan Hooker maybe couldn't afford to get taken down by without losing the rest of that round? Are there any? Hatsuhioki. Yeah. The other one I thought of was Yair Rodriguez in a transitional period of Hooker's career down at featherweight 7 years ago.
Yeah. He was a dramatically different fighter back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dan Hooker has primarily been given action fighters.
Yeah.
Which means also people who won't go for takedowns very much.
Yep. And in fact, in a lot of these fights, Dan Hooker has been the one with who turns out to have the wrestling advantage and goes for more takedowns and gets more takedowns. That was true against Dustin Poirier. It was true against Nasrat Haqparast. I think probably the smartest performance of Dan Hooker's entire career, where he just kind of cooked Haqparast on the feet, put him in a desperate position where he knew he had to go nuts for a finish, and then started out wrestling him. It's been a backstop for Hooker against all these action fighters in a way that it doesn't figure to be here. Would seem like a pretty bad idea to try to wrestle with Islam Makhachev. Again, he is the level of grappler and has a degree of focus to his game that it's like one takedown, that's the round, if not the fight. You do not want to give up those positions because he knows all of your instinctive responses to try to get out of them. That is, his game is designed around forcing you down those narrow paths of escape that he can anticipate and cut you off at the pass. So I think this is a thornier sort of matchup than I kind of figured it to be at first. And it's not like, let's be real, it's not like Makhachev is a scrub on the feet. He's obviously a sensational grappler. He has no issues there in the way that he occasionally does on the feet. But he is just as technical and crisp on the feet. It's just not a thing he can control at all times as he does on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, like, he is a genuinely, very decent striker.
He's certainly a better technical
very,
striker
very good jab
than Khabib.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely not sure who to pick in this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the low kicks are probably a big story in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that really is the core of Makhachev's game. Is the jab.
Yeah.
And Hooker's game is essentially jab or calf kick.
Mm-hmm.
If you are bracing, if you're bracing to throw your own jab, he'll calf kick you, and if you're not, then he will try and basically counter you with his own jab. It's a pretty functional game, assuming people can't check low kicks. The interesting dynamic here is open stance matchup. Which will mean checking the low kick will be a lot easier.
True.
Because I don't think calf kicks are particularly great. I think they are well, like most low kicks, they're easy to check in open stance. But yeah, you really just turn the knee in.
Yeah, I think Chris Weidman would agree.
So yeah, I think that's probably where like the big stand-up dynamic plays, is the interplay between their two jabs and Hooker's low kick, and whether that actually works. He didn't actually get many low kicks off against Haqparast for I think that reason, that he is mainly a calf kick guy. But it also didn't matter because Haqparast was backing up the entire time in a way which Makhachev won't. I think.
You don't think he will?
We'll pick. Sorry?
You don't think Makhachev will take the back foot? I think that's most likely.
I think Hooker will take the back foot.
You do?
Yes.
I'm not sure, but I agree with that. I think Makhachev he's a cautious striker. Likes to maintain distance. Hooker's not the kind of guy where you can like really firmly expect him to go one way or the other just as a rule. But, I think Makhachev's going to create some distance. I think the difference is that unlike Haqparast, he's going to have opportunities for takedowns, off of that sort of direction of movement. But, I don't exactly see him as the insistent pressure fighter against a guy like Hooker. It could be, because Hooker will also often be more cautious when he expects takedowns.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, him against Chandler was somewhat eye-opening for me. Also, the Felder fight, where Felder walked him down majority of the time. I do think he will be scared of the takedowns.
But he walked down Jim Miller, he walked down Gilbert Burns. I don't think it's a hard and fast kind of thing.
Yeah. I just think that Makhachev has proven to be able to get takedowns without running into like traditional one-shot anti-takedown weapons haven't been the way to get to him, really.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I entirely trust Hooker's defense against in protracted ground exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
I think Michael Chandler, when he was discussing with his breakdowns of the lightweight division, I think I've called this out before. He actually had really good leads on people, and he mentioned he thinks Hooker is someone that has a sort of Staffson-esque game, that he's very hard to take down. He's hard to take down and hard to keep down. Once he is down, he is, once he's past the 30-second guard, he's really past it, and you can keep him down. And I kind of trust Chandler's reads on that. It's been a while since we've seen Hooker in those kind of protracted exchanges, but going back to Yoki and I believe Maximo Blanco kept him down for a long time, and it's just the fact that we haven't seen him it's not the fact that we've seen him get visibly better in those kind of exchanges. It's just that they haven't happened at all. But it's a real unknown, and I think I think Makhachev's he's been too quality from top for me to pick against him.
Yeah.
And if he does back up, if he goes to the fence, I think he's very well schooled in that way. I think he will know that he should come forward. If he goes to the fence, I think he's gonna get chewed up.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of leaning Makhachev, surprising myself based on what I felt coming in.
Fit with your Russophobic instincts.
I know. That's the real problem.
Teach those commies.
Yeah. I think I'm still have my concerns about Makhachev on the feet. There is this feeling. I think there's truth to Michael Chandler's read on Dan Hooker. I think looking at him get a knee caught and get treetop taken down, by Jim Miller, and then go double underhooks and sort of right into a front headlock, work his way back to his feet. I just don't think there's that. I don't think Makhachev allows that kind of space. Even Miller's in his nose for transitional submissions is good for Dan Hooker there. I agree with the Gustafson thing. Hooker's game is designed to work against your other typical MMA grapplers who are going to give you these scrambles looking to find the one move that wins the fight. Makhachev doesn't operate that way. He's going to give you zero opportunities that he doesn't know exactly what you're going to do when you take that opportunity. He doesn't want you scrambling, he doesn't want chaos. He wants you to follow the path that he carefully paves and lays out for you. But I'm still concerned about Makhachev on the feet. Whether it's going forward or backward. It's not just the fact that Hooker is a finishing counter striker. It's the fact that Hooker has reach. And that's another thing Makhachev hasn't really had to deal with. Moises has reach and it was a non-factor because he didn't do anything. And just completely conceded all space and just waited for Makhachev's lead. So Makhachev was able to set up on him over and over. Hooker has a jab. How much harder is it to find those takedowns if the other guy can touch you at what you usually feel comfortably is your range? I think it may be a lot harder for Makhachev to set up on his takedowns than before. And that's what puts him in a position of does he get enough time on the ground? Is he dominant enough there to win the rounds if otherwise Hooker is just snapping his head back with range strikes? I don't know. I guess I think I'll stick with Hooker. It's
a really hard one to call.
It's a very tough call, and it just feels like the kind of fight I need to see Makhachev pass it more than I need to see Hooker past it. Hooker may have a sort of a couple one size fits all responses to getting to the beginning of getting out grappled that Makhachev can see through, but Makhachev has just fought a bunch of less confident, less dangerous, and certainly like less rangy fighters. Many of whom like do not have even that like, oh please, oh God, don't grapple me reaction. Thiago Moises, like Davi Ramos, Arman Tsarukyan, all these guys are like, I want to wrestle and grapple with you. And that was a huge sort of entryway into Makhachev getting the fight he wanted. The one guy who really didn't want it to happen was Drew Dober. And, Drew Dober is not Dan Hooker. So I'm going to take Hooker. I think he'll have enough success on the striking to sort of be able to prevent that first layer of Makhachev's wrestling from happening. And that's the kind of fight that he should thrive in.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like the sheer like dynamism matchup is very troubling for Makhachev.
Exactly.
Just finishing threats everywhere that he's got to work his way through in a way that he hasn't before.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yes, I think I'm going to take Makhachev, and probably by decision.
Yeah, I think it's a very dicey matchup for both guys. I really don't have a super strong lean one way or the other, which is weird because whichever guy wins, it feels like it's sort of a two true outcome thing. Whoever wins feel like they could be having a lot of one-way traffic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it. That's got to be it, right? We've been talking for way too long about MMA. We'll be doing it again next week because UFC 267 is followed immediately by UFC 268, the main event of which is Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington 2, a rematch that doesn't really need to be happening, but one which Phil and I think, both believe is still rather interesting as a contest. Also on that card, Rose Namajunas is rematching Weili Zhang. That is one I'm very glad is happening. Great knockout. Incredible. You know, I had a lot to say about it as far as quick knockouts go. I still am never completely satisfied by a quick knockout. I want to see a fight. And I think there is a lot more to be gleaned from this rematch that we just didn't get to see yet. Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler, Frankie Edgar, Marlon Vera, Shane Burgos, Billy Quarantillo, and also the prelims. Like, there's good shit all over that card as well. So make sure you tune in next week. I don't even know how we're gonna. There's gonna be another bonus episode right at the start of next month because I don't know how we're gonna manage to recap anything that happens at 267 and then still have time to talk about Usman Covington. So look forward to that. Lots of content just sort of all crammed into this one little short span of time. But we will be here to deliver it to you. And find Phil on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson. Find me on Twitter at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. And we will check you guys out next time. Check you out. We'll be back next time to talk about Usman versus Covington 2. This is turning into a really... I'm tired, Phil. I'm barely holding it together.
You're overtired like a baby.
Yes.
It's like you now can't stop speaking.
That's basically how it feels. This has been Heavy Hands. Bye.